Presented as a reverse horror game, Carrion allows the player to take the mantle of a monster you would normally see picking off hapless victims in an 80s video nasty horror film. The Thing, the Blob, the hunkering, slithering flesh sack that eats anything in its way. It's the kind of beast thing to squirm across the stone floor of its lair, merrily excreting the bones of its victims and gnashing its 1001 teeth like a coked up Liverpudlian on the weekend. It's that type of monster. You start the game by busting out of your holding container like a xenomorph from Kane's chest and slither along the screens until you come across some scientists willing to sacrifice themselves to the Monster Mash cause. The first thing that struck me about Carrion is the fluidity of movement. The multi-mouthed, tentacled monstrosity almost glides across the screen as its tendrils shoot out and stick to whatever direction you point it in. Pixelated blood smears every surface you touch, and you can't help but feel a delightfully macabre glee as you slam and toss around half-chewed enemies across the screen like ragdolls. To describe Carrion's plot as thin would be far too generous. It's so wafer thin that Carrion needs to run around in a shower just to get wet. As the monster, the driving storyline is to consume as many people as possible and build your biomass to an Akira level of total body horror. You won't be reading any notes here or interacting with any NPCs to prolong the narrative, no. Instead, your focus will be eating and gnashing on anything that has flesh and bones. You'll come across certain mechanical presses that give you an insight to a mysterious group of humans seemingly exploring the same area you're in, but at a different time than the present. Is it a flashback or a flash forward? I'm sure you could have given the script to David Lindelof and he would have been able to add a few mysteries, inexplicable phenomena and enigmatic figures he could introduce into the fold, but then fail to unpack. When these sections occur, you assume control of the human going about his business, but it feels like a gear shift down from all the destruction you've been causing as the monster. However, these human sections slowly reveal the truth behind the facility where you are located, and before you can say David Icke, you're likely to have guessed the outcome of these segments. If it sounds like I'm a little disappointed, it's because I am really. It seemed like a wasted opportunity as we could have got to know the team that's investigating the facility. There could have been more tension building with the puny humans, and these sections could have really brought a survival horror type element to the proceedings. But when you encounter your first biomass sample in the next section, the rest of the team have mysteriously disappeared, and there's a subtle yet unshakable feeling that these portions of the game have been added to increase the length throughout. There was one section in particular where my human character was meant to drop down off a ladder, but because I didn't know at the time that there wasn't any fall damage, or even that my character could do that, I wasted time by backtracking to look for an item or something I was meant to use in order to progress the gameplay. As it turned out, I was just simply meant to drop down. Thanks for letting me know that in the first instance, game. Don't get me wrong, I understand that Carrion isn't the type of game that will pull you in for its narrative arc, but I just felt that there could have been more. At a playthrough of about 4 to 5 hours, the focus relies heavily on the wanton destruction created by the monster. For the most part, Carrion is linear, but it does have a Metroidvania feel to the whole aesthetic. A lot of the areas you come across initially as the squid monster will be locked off until you acquire additional biomass. But your sole aim is to find growth pod areas where you can expand like a virus and start breaching the fortified sealed entries to the next chamber. It never feels that you're being shortchanged in this respect. You'll likely forget an area that's been locked off until the game drives you back to it, and by then you would have accumulated the necessary power to unlock the area. As the lowly first stage monster, you'll be able to shoot a web that flips switches, and for the most part, Carrion is a game about flipping switches. Some switches will seem inaccessible at first, but then you'll gain a new ability to smash that switch like a subscription link to this channel, and you'll be crawling through new vents and sucking the marrow out of some poor schmuck fairly soon. The progression system is pretty organic in the way it's presented in Carrion 2. You unlock new skills by finding and then trashing additional containers similar to the one you breached from. These unlock various moves like shooting webs, body slamming through barriers, turning invisible, extruding spikes, controlling humans with a parasite, and swimming in the water as a swarm of worms. The puzzles shown in Carrion can make you scratch your head for a minute, but they're never too complicated or frustrating by design to make you want to turn off. After a few minutes, you'll understand what you need to do and smile a mirthless grin as your monster manages to gain access to the previously locked off area and consume all the people inside. Each time you acquire a new biomass power, each form has a unique ability. Squid monster can shoot webs, medium-sized tentacled beast can ram objects like a juggernaut, and the unholy bulbous meat-flesh daddy haystacks can impel pretty much anything with spikes. You can change which 3 you can access by altering your size by depositing your own biomass into pools of crimson water to grow smaller, and this comes into play a lot with the puzzles. But of course, as your powers grow, so do your enemies. Defenseless scientists and security forces armed with handguns soon turn to machine gun wielding troopers with protective energy shields very similar to another world's antagonists.
Friend?
And then escalate to soldiers with flamethrowers, flying troublesome drones, and exoskeleton power loaders fitted with Blaine's Gatling gun from Predator. Such encounters with a room full of flamethrower troops and machine gunners can be taken whichever way you see fit. You can go in stealthily and control one of the soldiers to fire on their own, or flub in all biomass blazing as you literally roll over the enemies. It's your call. Some of these encounters seem to be won by chance though, but the checkpoints are so near and frequent, even if you do mess up a few times, it won't be long until you clear an area. One of the issues I found with Carrion was the backtracking. It was fairly easy to miss a one-way pipe and have to cycle through every room I'd been through when I couldn't figure out what to do next, and it could be a hassle to figure out how to get back. Some form of monstrous map perhaps would have been immensely helpful in these cases, but I guess once again that added to the longevity of the game. The soundtrack for Carrion has been minimalised, going for the horror vibe with ambient, chilling tones throughout. It works well with the aesthetic of the game, and there's a notable shift in dramatic pitch when you engage with a soldier or caught by a spray of fire. There isn't any voice acting to speak of, but the various sound effects of screams, gunfire and general carnage are done well throughout. Although a short game, Carrion does well to flip the usual horror tropes on its head and never leaves you feeling there's a dull moment in sight. The puzzles on display aren't too tricky, but may leave you guessing for a few minutes before the realisation dawns on you of what the answer is. Some people may argue that the selling price of $16.99 is a little too pricey for the amount of time you'll be spending with Carrion, but I enjoy the richly detailed atmosphere, the action, and the general slaughter the game provided. You may want to wait until Carrion gets reduced in price, but if you want to spend an afternoon reenacting John Carpenter's The Thing from the point of view of the monster, you'll be hard pressed to find anything better than Carrion.
Inside you.